So today we're going to finish, and it's a special day because we're going to conclude for the second time since we started this class a section of Tanya. About a year and a half ago, we finished, or a year ago, we finished a section of Likutei Amarim. Today we're finishing a section of Shaar Hayichud. What I think is probably one of the hardest sections for me to learn, to study, to teach, because we're dealing with ideas that are way, way out of our league, and we're trying the best to understand them, to learn them, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So right now we're just going to go, we're on page 178. I'm just going to take a moment or two to repeat the last thing we mentioned, because there's a very fascinating idea that I listened to and learned a little more about this week, and I'd like to share that with you. So on page 178, the last thing we said was, we're trying to give an understanding how in the short few words that was given by Hashem, or said or expressed by Hashem, by creation of heavens and earth, and the 6 days of creation, is included a tremendous amount of detail, which is not written clearly, but it's included that if you know how to rearrange the letters, combine letters, exchange letters, transform letters, etc. And he gives an example for where it says, Yehi Rakia, let there be a firmament, let there be a heaven, a spiritual heaven. And it goes on to, the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain 3 of the 7 heavens. He talks about the heaven called Shchakim. That's the heaven where the mun is grinded for the tzaddikim. He talks about the heaven called Zavul. That's the home, that's the place where you have the Beis HaMikdash sitting and waiting to come down, so to speak. And then he spoke about the heaven called Machon, the place where you have the snow, which is appropriate for today, and the hail waiting to be distributed as possible punishments or possible impacting the world. So why is this worth repeating, and why could we say that this is to understand maybe why the Alter Rebbe is telling us this, and why he picks these 3 worlds in particular, possibly as follows. I said last week we'll try and see why he chose these worlds. These worlds, you see more than any of these heavens, you see more than any other of the heavens, something very important that he's trying to express, or that he is expressing, we're trying to understand in this section of Tanya. And what is that? Every single thing in this world is not independent. One of the key elements and key ideas discussed in Shaar Hayichud is that every single thing in this world is not independent, God forbid, from Hashem, but it's an expression of godliness. In other words, every single thing that we see here, it's actually godliness expressed in the form of a table, of a chair. So the world does exist 100%. Everything is real, but it's not an independent existence, an expression of godliness. And we only see it in this form because we're living in a physical realm. If we're able to see it from a higher dimension, we'll see that it's all pure godliness. Where do you see that expressed? In the idea how every single thing in this world is truly only a reflection of something much bigger happening. Let's take it for an example, the world of Shchakim. Where does mun come from? The fact that we had mun in the desert, a food that had a very amazing existence to it. It had, forget about no calories and no carbs. It had no extras. Usually, right, no waste product. Usually when someone eats something, you have the nutrients you need and the parts you don't need, the body gets rid of. There was nothing there that your body didn't need, which was, by the way, one of the frustrations that people had is, it doesn't feel natural. I don't feel like I finished a meal if I don't have a production. People had trouble and were complaining to Hashem. It doesn't feel natural. But the reality was, it was a perfect existence of food in its flavor, in its nutrients. People weren't lethargic or tired or exhausted or after a meal. Like, sometimes you eat a meal, then we need a nap. On the contrary, we ate a meal, we felt energized because there was nothing in there that needed or had any negative effect on the body. Why was that? Because it was a reflection of a spiritual food. There was nothing mundane, corporal, material about it. It was purely spiritual. That's a reflection of how the food was in its source. In the heavens, it really wasn't some grinding factory. It was a spiritual concept which came down and expressed itself in the physical way in this world, that we actually had food to eat, something spiritual we ate, and it was a combination of those two. Take the world of Zvul, the heaven of Zvul. It says in the heaven of Zvul, there's a Beis HaMikdash, there's a temple, there's a Yerushalayim, there's a temple mount, there's a Holy of Holies. All of that exists in that world called Zvul. Zvul also means home. So in truth, and it says in the Gemara, and it says in Chassidus, that the world, the heavenly temple, is juxtaposed, is matching up to the physical temple, which stands in the Temple Mount in Israel. On a simple level, it means that it's matching each other. On a deeper level, the whole temple that we have here in this world is a reflection, is a expression of the spiritual temple. That means what happens above is not just it's there and we also have it here. Whatever you see here is exactly what you're seeing above. In other words, the Rebbe once gave a talk and he explained, why does it say in the Mishnah that Rebbe, the author, the one who compiled the Mishnah, Rebbe Nasi, it says he gave respect to wealthy people. It sounds so like, come on, you don't have to treat everyone the same. It says he gave extra respect to wealthy people. He said if Hashem gave them resources of finances, obviously in heaven above, they have resources that are very rich. And they can use it for good, use it for negative. They could change the world. They can make a bad effect, a good effect. In other words, someone who has something extra physically, a taller person, a shorter person, every fact about a person is because that's how you are spiritually. When something's hot in this world, cold in this world, that's how it is spiritually. So that spot in the world was holy because it was standing opposite a holy place called Zavul, lined up. And they had a temple that was a reflection of exactly what the temple was above. As a matter of fact, the fact that the temple was above, it was reflected in the temple itself. It says that the Holy of Holies, as you know, the Ulam, the Heichel, had 2 floors. What was the second floor for? So as brought down, the second floor was actually just a reflection of the fact that just like we have the temple and temple above, within it too, we had the temple and temple above within the temple. That means in it itself, it's like sometimes you have on a cover of a book, the picture of the book, and then you have in the picture there, you see the cover in small, and then you see the cover, you keep seeing, if you look closely, because there's a picture of the picture, and you see the thing compounded in it. In other words, yeah, it's like looking in a mirror, it has a mirror behind you, it's endless. If you have a mirror in the mirror, you'll see yourself and you see yourself and you see yourself. So in the temple itself, it had two levels corresponding to 2 levels of the temple in truth. In other words, every single thing we see in this world is not independent, but it's one with godliness. And the same thing is true with the final world, the final heaven that the Alter mentions is Mequon. Mequon, it says, where he has the snow and the ice and the he says the 2 main things we talk about in Tanya is the snow and the hail. He says, why does it have snow and hail in this world? I think it's random. It's because right now there's snow and hail taking place in the higher worlds. That means if it happens here, every single thing in this world is an expression of something happening above, which really expresses the ultimate theme of this whole. There are a couple things that we gain out of this whole section, the 12 chapters of Shaar Hayichud. One of those things we gain is an appreciation of the true understanding of Hashgacha Pratis. What does it mean that Hashem guides the world? So on a simple level, it means Hashem makes sure if there's a war going on, who should win the war. If there's an earthquake, Hashem made the earthquake happen. But the truth is that's on a very mundane level. On a deeper level, it's every single detail. As the Baal Shem Tov wrote the novel approach, Hashgacha Pratis, and the Rebbe explains it, it means when a wind blows and a leaf falls from the tree, it's not just that the wind blew as Hashem's wish. Every leaf that falls from the tree, that particular leaf had an intention, and how many times it turns over till it hits the ground matters. So you might think to yourself, we might think to ourselves, come on, okay, I could handle the big plan, it's all with a master plan. Hashem really cares this leaf, how many times it turns over? So it's a hard thing to relate to. But if you take it that every single thing that happens is something's happening upstairs, so the reason why this leaf turned over 30 times and landed on its face down or face up in that particular spot is because in heaven there's something spiritual going on, and that's a reflection of it. So it makes it a little bit easier to relate to how every single detail matters and every single aspect and every single nuance, and it tells you something special. That there's nothing in this world that's independent of God. There's nothing in this world that's outside His complete program. So again, it gets down to the same theme. And we'll get to the other point of Shaar Hayichud when we conclude this chapter.
When you're able to see the bigger picture.
I'm sorry?
Times when you're able to go into the bigger picture.
Yes. Now, but a lot of times we don't know what this means. Sometimes we get to find out. Sometimes you find out. There's this famous story of the worm that was crossing the sidewalk in the heat, and the Hashem made the leaf land on top of the worm to give him shade. So you might say, why did that leaf come down? I don't know. But this worm was dying, and he cries to Hashem, and he says, I can't take the heat. I'm drying out. Hashem tells the angel, blow the tree, tells the leaf, fall down. He tells the leaf where to fall. So that's, of course, how we understand it on our level. But that's really only the simpler level. The deeper one is that this is what's taking place in heaven. Right now in heaven, in some spiritual dimension, a leaf fell down. In other words, in the world, in the heaven called Mequon, a snowstorm is brewing. So the United States is covered with a snowstorm. It's not that the snowstorm is happening here, and that's what Hashem wanted. Of course it's what Hashem wanted. But it's happening because this is what's happening above. In other words, there's no independent existence of our life in the spiritual world. Our choice is to either recognize it or be oblivious to it. Okay. Then we started saying something else. And the last thing we said was as follows. It's the different setup of the letters have a different creation that takes place. So if you take the letters and reorganize them, it's a different world. A different thing is created. Like from the same word that would be, let's say, I don't know offhand a good example. I didn't think of one, but we take the same word that means two different things. If you sheker, thank you, sheker, which means false, and kesher, which means not, and kedesh, which means beam. So each one, the way the letters are organized, will create a different reality. Either something false or something which is a not, which is the opposite of false, because not is false is temporary, nots are permanent. That's truth. MS is permanent. Or keresh, a beam, and we know this is the whole concept of the Mishkan, as the Rebbe explains. So the question Alter Rebbe is asking himself he's asking before he goes further. He says, one second, if you have the same ingredients, imagine a person says, I'm going to make a mixture. I'm going to put in yellow and blue, and I'm getting green. But now I'm going to put in blue and yellow, I'm still getting green. How does changing the order of the letters change the result if at the end of the day it's the same exact ingredients? And that's why he tells us it makes a big difference which letter comes first. Because when you put a letter first, that's the pattern. However you start off something, this is the way the pattern follows. And if you put, it's like what's the difference between chesed shebegvura and gvura shebechesed, which is the primary, which is secondary? Is it an aspect of strictness expressed in love, or an aspect of love expressed in strictness? So the first letter, and this the Rebbe says in a footnote to the Tanya, this is the origin that we know why Rosh Hashanah are a big deal. A lot of times you see a word as Rosh Hashanah is an acronym, the word Chabad. Why can't we just say Chachma Bina Das? Because it's telling you the Ches, the Beis, and the Dalet are the key elements of those three words. Chachma is Chachma because the Ches came first. And Bina is Bina because the Beis came first, and Das because the Dalet came first. And those three Chabad are the primary aspects. So the origin that Rosh Hashanah is the real thing. The acronyms make up something and mean something is from this concept. And this we're up to in the chapter. Yes?
I think excuse me, on a molecular level, you can see that because let's say you have H2O, that's water.
Yeah.
But if you change things around or put different order, you get
different.
Okay,
Yeah.
so same thing as
From the
chemically.
from the
Same components.
Okay. And this is because whatever comes first creates. We have that concept very much in, for an example, in a mikvah, when you're filling up the water for the mikvah, whichever came first creates a status. If you have a mikvah with rainwater and you slowly add to it filtered water, the whole mikvah has a status of rainwater. If you have first rainwater and you add millions of gallons, so if you have first filtered water that was drawn, that came from the sink, that came from the pipes, and then you add rainwater to it, you could add all day long, it remains the status of filtered water. It doesn't have the status of a mikvah, which is why when we empty the mikvah to refill it, one of the things we have to be very careful with is not only the mikvah should be empty, it has to be dried to the point that fans and heaters blow it till the concrete is so dry that you have less than a lug, which is approximately like a mayonnaise jar, filled of water and soaked into the walls. So we spend, this is one of the tricks, the mikvah is empty and cleaned and washed. Under the mikvah, there's a sub mikvah where the rainwater is kept. We have to bring a fan down there and heaters and lights, and we hold paper towels against the concrete for a while, see if it gets any dampness to it. It has to be 100% dry to make sure what's establishing the status quo here is first rainwater. Then we start filling it with rainwater again, and this is done every 4 or 5 years. We'll do it again very soon to our mikvah here in Mequon.
Isn't it the same concept with wine? You first put a little wine and then
same exact as concept with wine, that you always add when you make kiddush, for an example. When you make kiddush, you add a little bit of wine at a time to that, and all that becomes the same as a kiddush cup. The Rebbe would do it. The Rebbe had special wine that he would use, which I don't know if he got it from his father-in-law, we got it from special wine. He would put a little bit in his kiddush cup and add to that more regular wine until it filled up, and all that had the status of the holy wine. We have kosher bracha for the Rebbe. Someone has left over from the good days. So you'll first take that and add wine to it. If you pour that wine into something else, it becomes lost in where it lands. So again, whatever comes first, it creates a status. Okay, days.
Where are you?
We're on. You know what? Let's just go one on up. It's the last word on the line is the word ice. It's on the left side of the line 178.
Yes.
The last word is ice. We're going back. You see the word ice? Shakol ice akademis. Yeah, exactly.
Or?
Well, the first word is harkavas.
Okay, shechol or?
Yes, shakol ice. And that's why I said, so how do you have that? This put the same exact. You put blue and yellow, and you get. So you're right. In colors, you get the same result. If you add blue and yellow or yellow and blue, you're still going to get the same thing. Actually, I know some guys when they make their coffee, they like to put in the milk first. They say it tastes different if you put milk than the hot water. Is it true? I have no idea. But some people do that. Again, what we'll have a taste at the end. We'll have a competition.
We'll do barista.
Okay. Shakol ois akademis b'tziruf, because every letter that comes first in a combo of letters, hagayveres, that is the one that's the strongest. And that's the primary that creates this new existence. Vashar tefeiles eleha. The rest of the letters are secondary, and become part of that story. For example, chesed shebegvura, teferes shebegvura, those are all gvura. The only thing is it a strict, for example, the easiest chesed we understand is chesed, where I'm kind and I give you chocolate. And there's gvura shebechesed, when I'm kind, I say, okay, one piece of chocolate is enough. And then there's a teferes, I say, you know what, you can have another piece if you have it with a cookie, if you have it with a sandwich. So there's all different types, but it's all part of one thing, giving you. So it's all different ways, and all those, even when I say no more chocolate, I'm being kind because I care about you. So I say, that's enough. 12 bars of chocolate, that's where we stop. That's it. That's how you have a brand new creation, because the new letter controls, the first letter controls reality. Therefore, we have a brand new existence. The same thing is true in exchanging of letters. What's he saying here? Now you have two things. The first thing the Alter Rebbe explained is how you have different things with the same ingredients. You can have different things. Now he's going to explain how you have not only different things, but things that are higher or lower in the spirituality. There are some things in the world that are very mundane. And again, because everything's a reflection of above, a tree which grows is very spiritual compared to a rock that doesn't grow, because spirituality is alive. Or something which is warm is more spiritual and fiery than something which is cold. So everything in this world, the more it doesn't move, the more it doesn't change, is a more sign of less spirituality. So for example, a stone or a block of wood that's cut from a tree has much less spirituality revealed. On the other hand, a tree that's growing, grass, has a lot of spirituality there because it's alive, it's growing. Something that produces other fruit, it's even more alive, etc. Something that goes up, it's even more spiritual. If nature is to go up. So he says, what causes the gradients of level of spirituality? That comes from if you had letters exchanged. Every type of exchange could be a little more diminished. Like we said, combining letters in different places is one level. Exchanging letters with letters that are similar is another level, but it's going down. Exchanging letters with letters that are opposite are even lower, like atbash. So you can keep going down, lower, lower. Using just the numerical value is even less, until you can get something called a stone or get something called earth. These are things that have no life force that's seen. They have a level of spirituality, but much, much less. And that's what he says. And therefore, the next stage is not just that you have variances, but variances in levels of spirituality. It comes from either chilufi oisiyos or tmud hasayim, exchanging letters, which is letters that are similar, or tmud hasayim, letters that are different. Those are a lower level in their existence than the levels where they started off. So the same word that might have been, a spiritual thing that says in the words clearly, the word shemesh, if you change it around and exchange with other letters so you get the word, whatever it might be, it's no longer so spiritual because it has a much lesser level of life. And that's reflected in the fact that we use not just exchanging letters, but transforming them to different letters and then a second time and a third time, etc. Derech mashal dugmas oir hameir balayla be'eres meireach ve'eireach hu me'ashemesh v'mtzoir shel ha'aretz hu oir ha'oir shel ha'shemesh. And he gives a metaphor from the moon. And this is a fascinating metaphor. He says you have the sunlight. The sunlight itself could come in all different forms, less and less. You could have the sunlight that shines on a regular day, on a cloudy day, through sunglasses, through a curtain, through a wall, through a reflection out of a mirror. All different ways that the sunlight comes down, and it can be more, it can be less. We're 93 million miles away, so what gets to us is much less. But that's all sunlight. Take the moonlight at night. What is the moonlight? It is sunlight, but it's reflected off the moon. Between me and you, the extra 100,000 miles, or whatever it is from the moon, didn't make such a big difference. When it travels 93 million miles, so if it was reflected off of a mirror, we would have got the sunlight itself. But it's not a mirror. It's the sun hitting the moon, and the moon reflecting that to us. That's called ha'er. The grandson, or the child of the child, meaning there's a sun, there's a light of the sun, and light of the sun that comes off the moon at night, that is a whole different light. You can stare at the moon, and you're not going to get blinded. When you stare at the sun, you get blinded. You stare at the sun in the mirror, you get blinded twice probably. But the moonlight now, what you're getting is much different. Same thing that Hashem creates the world, the process of the spirituality coming down. Once it comes to different letters, like the sunlight hits the moon and then comes to us. It's a much, much lesser and a whole different world. It's not just less. It's a whole different type of light. That's what he's saying. When you're going distances further and further, it's the same sunlight, but less. You have a sunglasses, you can look at it, it won't hurt your eyes too much. Or maybe you have special sunlights, you could, you have certain lenses to look through a telescope, but the sun, they're in eclipse, you can see, but it's still a sunlight. The moonlight is a whole different thing. Yet, you have a full moon, you can walk around at night, and it's lit up. You can literally, you have shadows. It's amazing. At night, you could actually see your shadow on the ground from the moon. It's beautiful, especially out of the big cities where the moon really has its effect. What is that? It's pure sunlight, but it's no longer the original. It's a different form of it. And this is what happens. He says this metaphor to understand the letters that are transformed and transfixed. We come now, it's the same source, it's the same light, sunlight, but it's no longer the same thing. It's a whole different world. And that is what he says, what happens when you exchange letters, the resulting creation is a whole different type of existence. The kocham mamish, exactly like that mashal, as in the metaphor, the letters that are found in the words themselves. That means when you have in the Tacha, let there be grass. Grass is a general concept of all different grasses in the world. There's probably, I'm not a guy who knows if there's hundreds or thousands or millions of types of grass that grows, but all grass is included in the one statement of grass. And then as it comes down into different levels, you can have all different types and details and types of grass and thicker grass and crabgrass. That's weeds and that's good, and that's not, and it's lush, and etc. etc. Like my lawn is not it came from a lot of levels down. You have to go down like 3 levels to get to my lawn. That is the general life force that gives life to some creation, whether it's beasts for an example, cows. You have many types of cows or animals, or let's say you have first mammals, then you have bovine, then you have this type of cow, and then you have the baby cow, the big cow. You can go into various levels, you go down more and more fine-tuned until you get the cow itself, all different parts of meat. Which all came originally from Hashem's midas. If you remember, what's the starting point? You have Hashem, his midas, which comes into Mamaris, which comes into creation. So all this carries the original light of Hashem's midas, Hashem's character. To create the world that come literally from nothing into something, to give them life, and to let them exist, as long as Hashem wants that thing to exist. Hashem wants it to exist 20 years, 30 years, hundreds, 1,000 years, it will exist based on Hashem's allowing the life force of his character, of his kindness, of his strictness, to come in the form of words, that comes in the forms of exchange words, till it comes down as a cute little puppy that you have in your house. And from this very large, top of next page, tzaddik. From this very large, general type of hamshacha, and this great light, Hashem gave forth power light. And Hashem came out of it children, meaning subcategories, sub things. Just like from the moon, it came out another reflection, another level, lower and lower as we made exchanges, until we come and branches, which that is the secondary generation of exchanges of light that comes through the letters of creation. And that's again going back to what we said before, the exchanging of letters, whether they're similar letters, what they're saying, whether different types of letters. And that goes into creation of all the individual and particular creations, down to different types of snakes and snails and bugs and all different types of things that are created, the types of fish. As you go more and more, it's going to become more and more divided up into more types and more types of existence, further and further from the original. But all enclosed with the same, like we said, the light from the moon is still only sunlight. It's not like there's another source of light. It's not like this moon got its light from somewhere else. It's all from the same place, just how it appears to us, it appears a different way. But then Hashem didn't stop there. Now we just said a light of the light. Now he's going to say there's something called a light of the light of the light. Meaning, obviously, if we can get to the point where you have something called Ahmadinejad, you have something called pork, you have something called evil in the world, where does that come from? Obviously, as you keep going down and down and down, muddling it more, until you get down to something which is completely different. How did this come from there? Well, it's a process. He gave it a light of the light of the light. And it, meaning the process of creation, what we're trying to say is that every single thing that you see in this universe started off with 22 letters. Whether it's a bug, whether it's, God forbid, a terrorist, whether it's something kosher or unkosher, whether it's a pair of tefillin, whatever it is, all came from the same oneness in the world. Only one source of creation. There's only one sun giving light, and everything that you see is all levels and levels of concealment to get to this point. And he says, and then further, until eventually the process allows, and these eventually were able to create even stones and even earth, dirt, which why they considered so down, because daimim is considered the lowest of the low. It is nothing to it. There's no character. It doesn't walk around. It doesn't give. It doesn't take. It just sits there. A stone can sit undisturbed for 2,000 years and is completely satisfied. Just don't take an axe and pick my head open. That's all he cares. He is completely satisfied to do nothing, which is a sign of the opposite of spirituality. That's death, God forbid. No moving. So where do you get the names stone, which is Evan, or earth, which is Afar? It's the exchanges of exchanges. Like we said before, it is everything comes from the same source. It's just how far down the process do you go to get there. Nishlam Chelik Sheni. This includes the second part of the Tanya. Bezes Hashem Yisparech V'Yishala. With the help of Hashem, may he be blessed and elevated. Now, the first section of Tanya, Likutei Amarim, was all about how we should function. It assumed you believe in God, you have faith in God, and you love God, and you want God. Your problem is, how do I make it real? I have days I don't feel God. I mean, it doesn't come to convince you any philosophy about God, God's oneness, God's essence, God's truth. Nothing about that. It came to tell you one thing. If you're struggling, here's how to overcome these struggles. Here's how not to get down. Here's how to stay positive. Here's how to work with yourself. Know who you are. Know your dimensions. It was all about you and your struggle to be successful in your role as a Jew. This section is just the other extreme. What is faith? What do we believe? What do we have to know? And this really is the ultimate in what Hasidus Chabad is all about. If you think about it, there was always Jews that went and did Torah mitzvahs. But what did the Alter Rebbe come to explain? How godliness can be understood. You could take God, which is so above the human concept, the human limitation, the human comprehension abilities, and draw it down to the point that we have some grasp of it. Chabad means bring it down to intellect. Not just emotion, but eventually to emotion. But it shouldn't be just something you do because, okay, I put on tefillin, I light a Shabbos candle. It's something to understand and believe and to appreciate the depth of this truth. And this is what the second part of Tanya comes, is to help us fulfill a Chabad sort of living. What does this do? If you remember that one of the things we explained in the beginning of, or not in the beginning, it's actually towards the middle of the Likutei Amarim, was the difference between doing things with feeling and without feeling. Is the difference if a mitzvah has wings or not. Wings could lift it up and take it to a level higher and higher. The same mitzvah. If it has wings, it's a whole different mitzvah. With this part of Tanya, well, we can suddenly see that every single thing that we do and every expression, everything has an effect. It changes the way we do things. When you're eating a piece of cake, or you're having a good day, you're having a bad day, or you're having something, you're experiencing something, you're going somewhere. there's nothing that's random. How much more so when it comes to doing a mitzvah? Mitzvahs are not just, and then of course learning Torah, are not just random, like, snowstorm or you missed your flight, make your flight. Mitzvahs are direct instructions from God, what He wants done by you today in this world, at this exact hour, in this exact place. Take for an example the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. Hashem tells you, if you're a woman and it's Friday afternoon, take a candle. So imagine where you're getting the most instruction for this particular minute. And that's, again, if you saw today's Hayim Yom, which is very beautiful for today, it tells you about every person that's given a particular mission, particular job, what to do to elevate the world. So to combine Shlekuti Amarim, which is the instructions, how, and Shaar Emunah, the what, or the backstory, this gives us a whole different perspective on Yiddishkeit in our existence and our story. So with this concludes the section of Tanya called Shaar Emunah.
Human beings give up energy that you can feel far away.
I agree.
Plants, you can feel energy. They're very strong on plants.
Yeah.
And if you break off a leaf or part of a leaf, you can still feel the energy for a while.
Coming out.
The same thing with a human being. When a human being dies, there's still energy for I don't know for how long, but I have felt the energy.
But this idea that
once a person is gone,
this idea is the truth of existence. I think the more science, it used to be if you knew science, you didn't believe.
right?
Today, I think the more science someone knows, the more you see the power of God. The concept that there's something that's making these atoms, the electron, neutron, spin around and fly at such speeds. What's causing that? You have to believe there's some power, there's a life there that's going on. I mean, and especially you go down to the level where you see it. We don't see it. We just touch it. We just feel a rock.
Exactly. You go to
Someone who sees that activity.
That's a table. No, go level.
Yeah.
You're gonna see everything is moving around. I say, oh, really?
But it's interesting when you study Tanya. And you're a scientist. It absolutely does not contradict.
I always enjoy learning with Shimon. We learn a lot together, and he always brings examples that we're talking about from ideas in chemistry or science or physics, where he says this is an idea like in the outer space or in the, and again it's cool to be able to know both things.
Or you take a drop of water. You say, it's water. Then you put in a microscope, everybody moving around, all bacteria and all everything.
Then you won't want to drink water anymore. Don't look too close to the water. Bella Ann, great to see you, and we're gonna convene, God willing. I have to check my schedule next week, I think, and we'll share and celebrate continued study. And we'll spread the word. If someone didn't join the class until now, next we're starting a new book, a new section, which is also, if you made it through this section, you can do any, because this is I think the most abstract study we're going to do for the last year.
Will I be able to connect on Zoom with you with the old ID and password?
Yeah, I don't know what happened today with the Zoom, but how did you connect today?
Through the web. Whatever you had sent to me.
We should go back to. I'm not sure why I went weird today, but that's part of the fun of computers.
Right.
All right. Have a good day. We'll see you, Belle.
You too. Thank you.